So, one of the things we'll be talking about today, in addition to the absolute, and just to say, when I use the term absolute, I'm meaning the source, what Christians might call God. The absolute is a term that's used in Buddhism to mean the source. And the term absolute comes from understanding its absolute truth and absolute reality. And the main thrust of my teachings is around awakening and then the heart practices, the Buddha's heart practices. And I use the term Buddha's heart simply to mean authentic heart. And so the awakening tie-in here is that an awakening experience is the absolute awakening to itself in a particular location. So in this consciousness, the absolute awakens. So it's not that Stephen awakens or that the personality awakens. That doesn't happen. But the awakening happens in a particular consciousness. And awakening is really a foundational cornerstone of Buddhism. The Buddha did a number of practices prior to his awakening, which we still do in Theravada Buddhism, particularly in the concentration practices. And then his awakening and practices are the basis of all the teachings that we have in Buddhism. My teacher in Myanmar says that the practices we do, the heart practices in particular, are exactly what the Buddha did. I tell people I don't necessarily have that historical knowledge, but I believe his sincerity when my teacher says so. So I pass it along in that with trust. So let's start with what an awakening experience is. And from my perspective, there are three components that need to be present for an awakening. The first is a deep experience of what I call absence of self. And absence of self is characterized predominantly by when we turn inward. If I ask you, who are you? And the normal function would be to turn your awareness inward and to find a variety of ways to identify yourself. Oh, I'm this body, I'm this history, I'm these memories, and then specific things. I'm this age, I'm this gender, I live in this location. So all the ways that we can say we have a self. And when we're experiencing absence of self, it's not possible to answer the question. If I were to ask someone who's deeply experiencing absence of self, who are you? The common response would be, I don't know, or I have no idea. There literally is a question mark. We just don't know at all. And normally the absence of self will linger for a while or be present for a while before an awakening. I know I had probably 3 or 4 different times of being deeply in absence of self before the first Kensho that I had. And at first, they were short because the knee-jerk reaction is to fill in the self, to feel lost and to feel uncomfortable about not having the normal self present. So I quickly filled it in and didn't no longer had the absence of self experience. But over time, I learned to be more and more comfortable not knowing who I was and still functioning fully in my life. So when the absence of self experience arises, I'm just encouraging you to let that be present and not do the normal human thing, which is to find the what I call the markers of me, the way we establish and maintain a self. The second component is seeing clearly one's true nature as true identity. So true nature is a term used in Buddhism. I use it to mean the absolute in a particular consciousness. So the absolute in this consciousness, I'd refer to as true nature. We could call it the absolute, that would be fine also. But just to say location wise, that's what we're using. So it would be the recognition of the absolute in an individual consciousness and the realization that's who I am. That's truly who I am. So more true than the personality and all the trappings of the personality. And then the third component is a thoroughgoing unity experience, a love experience. Everything is a fabric of oneness, all is one, which includes us. Now, typically, when I was a young Zen student, a lot of the teachers had the first two experience, the absence of self, what's traditionally called no self in Buddhism, and then they would see true nature as true identity. But many of them didn't have the love experience, the unity experience. And when that happens, it can lead to a lot of unintended brutality, because the unity experience, the love experience, really promotes a oneness and a deep love and compassion, so that the teacher really has a great love for the student. So there's a lot more tenderness that can be conveyed in the relationship. And like I have students who will have experiences of absence of self. They'll realize no self. And I have students who will have the unity experience, the love, all is one experience, which I consider to be a realization of unity. It's not a Kensho, because you don't have all three components. And typically those folks over time, the other components will be activated, but it normally starts or can start with one or two of these three components. And when we talk about depth of awakening, that's really about how long the sense of self is suspended. So how long the normal personality is suspended and we're functioning as the absolute or as true nature. And the process after Kensho, first Kensho, there's a titration between the personality and the absolute, the vastness of the absolute. There's times when the absolute is the identity, and there's times when the personality is the identity. And really what's happening is a kind of harmonizing, where we're seeing our behavior as a personality and we're upgrading that behavior. We're deciding, do I need to do things differently? Is my attitude or behavior in this way still in conformity with my understanding, my realization? So in simple language, our outside needs to match our inside as best we can.